Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the MCL Construction Client Conversations. Over the next half hour, we're going to have a discussion about, well, construction, of course, but we're going to dive a lot deeper into conversation. We're going to talk about growth. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about opportunity. And it's good to be here. I'm Travis Justice. I'll be your host. And we got a great conversation coming up. And as you can see from the graphic in the background, we're going to talk about faith today, too. So we can add growth, leadership, opportunity, and faith into that conversation. But before we dive into our conversation, let's talk a little bit about MCL Construction. If you don't know that much about us, we are a general contractor, construction management firm in Omaha, Nebraska. You can find us on social media. You can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. Of course, a lot of you are watching us on these social media platforms. And do check out our website for all the services that we offer at mclconstruction.com. A little bit about us. We were founded in 1987. We have, in addition to our location here in Omaha, Nebraska, we also have an office in Kearney, Nebraska. Right now, 171 employees. That fluctuates up and down, and as a lot of businesses do. But we do want you to know that for many businesses, navigating the entire construction process and knowing who to trust can be downright overwhelming. All right, because if you're taking on a big project, you're like, who do I trust with this? There's a lot at stake. Well, here at MCL Construction, our people simplify the process by listening, planning, executing, and continuing the relationship to build their vision. Today's client conversation guest is Todd Doxzon. A lot of you may have heard of Todd. Of course, he's from Omaha originally, played football at Millard North in 1993. Millard North graduate. He founded Love Church in 2008, currently serves as the lead pastor at Love Church, and he is a former college and professional football player. And Todd joins us now. Todd, it's great to have you along. And I should add to this as well that you are also now a fellow broadcaster. I got out of broadcasting to go into construction. You got out of football, went into the ministry, but you're starting to dibble-dabble in that broadcasting thing because we were talking right before we started. You've been doing the Thursday night football games on the CW15 in Omaha for 11 years now? Has it been that long?
Can you believe it? Year 11, over a decade. And Matt wrangled me into the deal. I'm so blessed to do it. It's actually one of my little secret, you have like a secret job. It's like, you ever ask the question, if you didn't do what you did now, what would you do? And I would be for sure into color commentating. I love the game of football. I love how it translates to life in general. I love investing in young kids coming up. I love encouraging coaches, and some of the faithfulness and consistency and leadership you see even in the metro area here is phenomenal. So there's a lot that I get out of personally Thursday nights, but I also love to give back as well.
When you play the game as long as you did, and we'll get in, I want to dive into your professional career a little bit because you played in the XFL, which is amazing to me. I'm sure you have great stories about that. But what did football, as you look at your life and the way it's progressed, right? What did football, how big of a part did that play in the man you are today?
It's interesting if individuals look back on how they were raised, how they were created, what gifts and talents they have, what circumstances, what adversity you go through. I think the game of football, just sports in general, Travis, as you know, the team concept, it's we, not me. It's having the right person on the right place on the bus. The game of football in general, you have to have a left tackle, but you also got to have a quarterback. You have to have a receiver. Everybody knowing kind of where to fit. So much on leadership. I would say specifically for me as a quarterback going to Iowa State in the early 90s, where my sophomore year we were 10-1. Try to be the leader of an organization and never win. Can you come out of that organization, that team, and still grow through it? I have a phrase, we say it all the time out of James 1, that true maturity comes out of adversity. And so my early career was just all kinds of adversity, injuries, losses. How do you bounce back from that, I think, is a major key. And then just continued throughout my career now as a lead pastor, all the time being a quarterback, leading and understanding the power of team has really helped us. My wife and I really lead this church and just continue to add to this team.
It's funny. You played at Iowa State. You were a quarterback. You played for Jim Walden. And you're right. The Iowa State where you played is not what the Iowa State is today. But you may not know this. wife was a member of the Iowa State varsity football marching band.
Come on, baby.
No,
Let's
serious.
go. Back in the
Serious.
Walden days? Let's go.
Back in
That's
the
what I'm
Walden
talking about.
days.
Oh yeah.
Back in the Walden days. Yeah.
It's a
So now,
different, it's a whole different deal now, man. You go there in the marching band there and just the environment in Coach Campbell era right now. I mean, it is ridiculous.
so how did football, how did a kid from Millard North go to Iowa State, play professional football? You get done, you're probably thinking, I'm going to be a broadcaster. I'm going to go be a business guy. End up being a pastor. Take me through that journey for you, because it's not a traditional by any means.
I'll give you the cliff notes, man. I was one of those kids that hated church. I hated, I thought if you became a Christian, you had to turn your cool card in. My mom drugged me to church. I was that kid, where I wanted to be popular and, have the girls and the money and, the fame and all that. And after Iowa State, I went to the New York Jets as a free agent and was really actually having a really good camp. That was Bill Parcells' first year in New York, and ended up pulling a hamstring in training camp. And talk about hitting rock bottom. It was like my whole life just came to a screeching halt. And I kind of hit rock bottom, went back to Iowa State, finish my degree. And I was out, I had hit rock bottom so bad. I had gotten into drugs, delivering drugs, doing crazy stuff. And God just, yeah, I'm
Really?
telling you, yeah. And he smacked me in the face. I was actually working for Jimmy John's, finishing my degree and dealing weed in Ames, Iowa. And God just it was like in my truck in a snowstorm was like, Todd, you can continue down that road, bro. But the result is going to end in chaos. Or you could just choose me. You go all in with me and I'll completely, revamp your life. And by God's grace, bro, that was 1997. So I'm in year 24 in this journey of faith. It's been a roller coaster up and down, but he's been my anchor ever since, man. So it's pretty wild.
See, my boss is gonna get mad at me, but when you said Jimmy John's and weed, they kind of go hand to hand, right? I mean,
exactly. The gargantuan, baby, the gargantuan at 3:30 a.m. Let's go.
I always say it's a prerequisite to work there. All the drivers show up. I'm like, oh, you've been token when you showed up.
Been blazing, bro. Yeah, that's me.
But you were freaky fast, so that's why you fit into Jimmy John's. But
we make up for it.
So you hit rock bottom, and that's pretty darn rock bottom when you're dealing weed in Ames, Iowa. You find your path. You played professional football up through what, 2001, 2002, I believe it is.
Well, what ended up happening, Travis, is cliff notes. After I surrendered my life to Christ, the New England Patriots actually signed me. They sent me to NFL Europe. Kurt Warner signed with the Rams, and they sent him to the same team. Well, Kurt was in Des Moines at the time. I'm in Ames, and our coach, Al Luganville, said, hey, he got us connected. So Kurt would come up, and I would run routes. I made the transition from quarterback at Iowa State. Now I'm going to play receiver. Kurt was a quarterback. He came up to the rec center, and he would run me ragged. So we got basically prepared for training camp. Well, we moved to training camp in Atlanta. We were roommates, and then we go to Amsterdam, of all places, and we're in Amsterdam in NFL Europe, and we're roommates there. And so what was so cool when you think about, and I won't get into a crazy theology, but I'm a pastor, so I can tell you, in the sovereign plan of God, he puts Kurt in my life, who was a cool dude. I was like, remember, I thought all Christians were nerds. Here's a cool guy, competitor, someone I could look up to. And he basically, the Christian term is disciple. He trained me, really. What does it look like to be a solid, biblical Christian man? And that was 4 months, man. And that changed like everything for me. So long story short, went to New England, pulled a hamstring again, ended up going to Miami. And that's where I got my only real NFL experience, was on the field, game time experience was for the Dolphins, backed up Dan Marino. And then, golly, that was 1998. But I ended up playing all the way through 2005 in the Arena League. So I went to the XFL and then finished with 5 seasons in the AFL, which was more my talent level. I was scratching to get in the NFL. Let's just put it that way. I could run, but I didn't have near the gifts that some of these guys had. So Arena was a good fit for me.
So you played in the XFL. You won a championship in the XFL. What was it like being with Vince McMahon in that 1 year? Because I mean, they did some innovative stuff. But it was a crazy league for sure.
I thought it was a blast, and for guys like me who were kind of on the cusp of the NFL, and it created an opportunity for guys like us to really play the game that we love. Make a decent paycheck, travel some more, meet some new guys. I mean, the relation. That's one of the things about the game of football. Like I have friends, Travis, from years ago, the last 2 decades, that I could pick up a phone
Wow.
right now and have a great conversation. Kurt's movie's coming out at the end of the year,
Yep.
and just to see, getting an invite from him to the Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and just having these conversations throughout the years, and not just Kurt, but so many other guys throughout my career. I think that's one of the main things that I loved about it.
So football ends. You decide, let's just start a church, right? I mean, is that how it went?
I'll tell you, the last thing in the world that I ever thought, or if I'm perfectly honest with you, wanted to do, if I had my preference, I would have went into college coaching, with a goal of being a D1 head football coach, maybe a receivers or quarterbacks position coach. And we were Denise and I were at this crossroads. We actually went to Bible college, just had such a heart for God and the Word. And what happened is I got this burden on my heart to help people study their own Bibles, not just go to church 1.8 times a month, but like really get to know God for who he says he is through the entirety of the scriptures, which is, again, I mean, I wasn't that great of a college student, man. I was a 2.8 maybe GPA guy, but
Hey, that passes.
hey, C's get degrees. But it's like,
That's
okay,
right.
there was this passion that I felt like God placed in me that I could have went another direction, but I don't know if I'd feel fulfilled. So we took the step of faith. We went on staff there's a Calvary Chapel in Fort Lauderdale, 10, 15,000 people. We were on staff there for a couple of years, and then they just kicked us out, and sent us back here to Omaha. We started at Kiewit Middle School, which was my old middle school here, went to Millard North, and then we just finished this building that you guys did such a marvelous job. I brag on MCL all the time. I mean, from Bob to Tony to Sam, Sammy did such a phenomenal job leading the crew here, all the workers. I'm telling you, our team, I mean, just the way that you guys worked with them, so relational, professional, on time, as expected, above our dreams is kind of what we ended up with.
Well, and I was telling about, you don't know who to trust when you're spending, let's face it, millions of dollars, right?
That's right.
And so when you hire us, you go through this, and I remember sitting with you before, and let's take a look at the worship space, because this is
Yeah, man.
phenomenal. But do you remember you and I were sitting in here before there was anything in there? We put those VR glasses on you,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
you were literally able to see the stage, the seats, everything the way it was going to look. Do you remember that?
I really do. I remember getting emotional actually at that point, because again, you look at, this was a vision for years. I mean, this was year 13 of the journey that we finally, build a first permanent location. And to walk into that with those little goggles on, that was wild that you guys could give us a picture of what was to come, and how uncanny it was. I mean, even the depth perception and everything. I remember, that technology you guys provided for us, phenomenal.
So you got the worship space. Here's kind of lobby space when you walk in. Tell people what this space means to you. I mean, I would say, I'm Roman Catholic, right? So your church is completely different than my church when you
Sure.
walk in. So tell people what they can expect when they walk in.
From day one, our prayer was always every single person, no matter where they're at in life, would feel loved, accepted, and just feel embraced. So aesthetically, we were looking for light, bright, warm, inviting, and that's really what you guys provided. I mean, the design, the build, and kind of simple. I've always been I love simplicity. I'm kind of a minimalist, so not a ton of crazy stuff, but real simple, clean, light, and bright, and more importantly than anything, warm and inviting.
Of course, Leo A. Daly was the designer on this, the architect on it, and then your worship space is truly inspiring because and what people can't see where this picture's taken, there's theater style seating and like an auditorium wise, and this really, from acoustics to light to sound, this is perfect. It really is.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what there's a tricky thing when building a church like this because you want it intimate enough to feel like it's still a small church, but large enough to host as many people as we can. And also, like you said, the sound, the lights, again, it's there's this weird thing in modern church. You don't want to be showy, but we our heart is to be very celebratory. I mean, we serve a God who's amazing, so gracious to us. And so there's something about, energetic music and lights and passion that is authentic. And so we wanted the space to correlate with our genuine heart. And again, you guys nailed it.
And here's some of that wide open space. That natural light coming in those front windows is absolutely amazing. It really is.
And you see that fireplace right there. That's my wife. I tried to fight her, because I like open, and she's like, no, like I know God's called us and talk about warm and inviting. It's one of the number one things that people they're like, man, it's like I'm walking into a home as opposed to maybe a cold, dark church. It's like this warmth, this light. Yeah. And even simple things like that, we pray are a bridge for people to feel more comfortable as they're entering the space and having an opportunity to connect with God.
If you have questions for Todd, you can leave them in the comments section. They pop up and we can show those. So if you want to leave questions for Todd, I'm sure he'd be more than happy to answer them, but you Absolutely. Can leave them in the comment section, whether you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or even YouTube. And I appreciate the great things you said about MCL Construction. It was a pleasure to build for you and your team. You'd have what I remember most, like Sam Howe, the project manager on there, would come and tell me, he goes, man, I go, how was it at Love Church today? He's like, awesome. You had members of your congregation show up with like cookies and baked goods in the middle of the winter. It was construction. I mean, you talk about a football team going through this. It really is a team. No matter what you do, being part of a team makes it successful, right? I mean, whether you have your architectural team, your construction team, and your team, it really took all three of those phases to make this thing come together.
Well, there's no question. I'll give you an example. So being a quarterback, I understand I can't, call the play, hand the ball off, run, block, I can't do everything. And so just for an example, my wife really was a big part of the design with Leo. There's a guy named Brett Elliott who's on our finance team. Yep. He's starting this brand new business and going to a lot of the meetings with MCL. And he just kept on talking about the chemistry that he had with you guys, specifically with Sam and some of his team. And, we had some meetings with Tony and Bob, and they were gracious. I mean, because you got to remember, we're building a multi-million-dollar permanent facility in the middle of a pandemic. And so everybody's asking questions, what's going to happen? People are a little bit different with finances and just, I remember meeting with Tony one time and he's like, we're in this together. And every business leader is supposed to say that, but when I could look at Tony and just see him in his eyes and go, he meant that verbatim, and like I said, both your key leaders, your whole team, nothing but gracious with us, and we felt it. And in fact, we were coming down to this decision process on who to build with, and there's a lot of great companies in Omaha, absolutely. And we were down to two, and we could have probably went with either one, but there was our team, or at the very end, we're like, we really sense a peace with MCL. Let's go that direction. And again, I can't say thank you enough for providing, how do I say it, our church family with this first facility that we can and the expansion that has happened has been just insane. But it really has helped to get this first one done.
So you bring up something very important. you got to raise money to pay for this. Then a pandemic hits, right? And that's where that quarterbacking comes in. That's where I believe, that's where that comes in. And I want to talk to you a little bit about leadership. And I asked you before we got started, kind of your thoughts on leadership, right? I mean, some people have Tony Robbins, some people have Zig Ziglar. You go to the Gospels. You go to the Gospels, according to Mark, and chapter 10, verse 43 through 45. Go through each one of these verses and how you take this and relate it to everyday leadership for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, the main idea is servant leadership, Travis. And if you look at verse 43, this is Jesus, the ultimate leader. And he's talking to his disciples, and his disciples are like, hey man, like, all right, should I want to be top dog and this and that. And he's completely shifting the culture. And he's saying, hey, that's not how it is among you. The people in the culture, they love having a position so they can just tell everybody else what to do and kind of demand, their needs be met and all this. He says, actually, in my kingdom, it's a complete flip flop. He says, if you want to be a leader, and who doesn't want to be a leader, right?
Yeah.
If you want to be a leader, whoever wants to be must be your servant. So it's this whole flip flop, and to the point of, we challenge people. You're going to be a leader at this church. Awesome. Like, how can you serve someone constantly? What does it look like to open a door, pick up some trash? There's no task that's too low for you. An example, our worship team, we talk about, can you be cool to be behind the scenes before you hit the stage? And it's almost like this vetting process to see who can be a consistent, humble servant. Those are the type of people we want in leadership positions at this church. And that's really what he talks about there. And, he says it, he's like, even the Son of Man, I mean, I'm the king, I'm the CEO of the universe. He's like, even the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give my life away. And the people that you really want to follow, those are the type of people you want to follow. They're always giving their life away for you. They're looking out for your interest. And, easier said than done, of course.
It is easier said than done, but I think that gets lost in a lot of leadership as people climb the corporate ladder and they're focused on a title. They're focused on the money they can make. They're focused on power. Well, it's not. You forget what makes great leaders. And everybody that I've been around that was a great leader, that I've considered a great leader, had that servant leadership quality to them, where they were, and servant comes in a lot of different ways in a corporate level, right? I mean, that's sitting down and coaching. That's, rolling up your sleeves and doing the work if you have to do it, but always being there for your employers, whether that's, emotionally, financially, just any way to be able to help your employees out. That's that servant leadership. And I think that gets lost on a lot of people in the C-suite these days.
I completely agree. I'll give you an example. My wife is one of my favorite leaders around. And when people ask me what's my favorite quality about her, I don't really bat an eye. It's thoughtfulness. And that's something that I'm always on my mind. I'm like, my comfort, like what I'm doing, like I want it to be all about me. But when you can be others centered and you can be, how can I serve them? How can I lift them up? How can I encourage them? It's really been a great challenge to me in my leadership. So you're exactly right in all areas. And again, it's not easy, but the more leaders on your team that you can develop to be authentically living that out, the more healthy your organization is going to be.
On LinkedIn, Derek Stroman says, "Hey, great to see your success, Todd. Congrats. What's the story behind the name?" Because right, and that must be, he's referring to the church, because when you first hired us, it was Calvary. Then all of a sudden you're like, "Hey, put the brakes on. It's now Love Church." So what was the story behind the name change of the church?
I love it. First of all, Derek, great to see you, bro, and I appreciate it. Try to give you the Cliff Notes version for time's sake. To be very transparent with you, we were probably year 7 or 8 in the church, and we were going through the interesting season, and there was something in me that was just kind of like, man, why does church have to be so political? And why does it have to be so complicated? And I remember I was at a pastor's conference, and I was really praying for vision and direction. And man, do you want me to go into college coaching? Do you want me to stick with this? And I had this vision. It's going to sound weird, man, but he's like, just keep it simple. Love me and love people. Like, and I had this picture of this L with these arrows on it, and it was
Oh,
electric
wow.
pink. It's kind of like the background right here. And he's like, "Hey man, love me supremely, and I'll love people through you supernaturally. It's all about love. It's and I want you to name the church Love Church." I'm like, that is so weird. Like, that's lame. Love Church, Love Church, and I'm like struggling with it. I remember coming home and everybody thought I had, I'm back on the bong or something. It's like, what happened to you, bro? Like, are you smoking again? And I'm like, no, I really believe that this is a God thing, that he's calling us to really keep this thing simple, help people from Genesis to Revelation daily through the scriptures, talk about it in small groups, preach from it, and then break the huddle. And let's stop Bible beating and bashing people and headlocking people to heaven, but like, let's genuinely exude the love of Christ and give them the opportunity to respond, between them and God. Don't force it, live it out. So that's the idea.
You know, I do want to be respectful of your time. We got about 4 minutes left, and
Sure.
you have words to live by, and these are surrendered, surrounded, spirit-led, self-fed, and sent. Uh, Give me a synopsis of these five.
Yeah, again, I'll give you the cliff notes. We what we say is our goal is that people experience God's best for their life. And so we start with surrendered. It's like it starts with 1997 when I'm in my truck in a snowstorm, and I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm surrendering to God's best. Surrounded, I'm surrounded by people, not perfect people, but people that are moving the same direction towards God's best. And we talk about the power of that. That was with Kurt early on in my life. To this day, my small group, spirit led. Again, not like forcing the issue, but letting God's spirit lead. Self fed is that challenge to daily be in your own Bible. Uh, don't depend on your pastor or your grandpa or your mom to give you the Bible, but man, study it on your own, self fed. And then finally sent, like, man, be on mission. Try to be a blessing. Let God be a blessing through you every single day, whether it's a small thing, a small thank you, a small smile, a hug, a handshake, or maybe it's $1,000 random blessing you give someone, sharing the power of what Christ has done in your own life. Just be on mission. And so that's the basic synopsis of it.
So, what's next for Todd Doxzon? What's next for Love Church? You're in your new facility. Is it expanding the ministry? What's next? Because you have Todd. You're such a motivation to a lot of people because you have a purpose, and when somebody has a purpose, you thrive off that energy. That is an energy that I think is contagious. So you know what your purpose is, but what's next, right? Because you either keep growing or you stop. So what's next for you?
Yeah, the basics are, again, I'll give you just the big picture. We have a goal in the next 10 years to reach 100,000 people. So to do that, this next year and two, we're expanding our online campus. It's already grown India, Africa, Colombia, all throughout the States,
Wow.
reaching a ton of people. So not just online, but then in the Midwest regions, you think about Des Moines, the Kansas City, Minneapolis, Denver areas that we want to eventually have locations, physical locations, but we'll just, same thing. We'll let God lead. This whole thing is definitely not about Todd. I know how to run a 6 route, and I know to pluck and tuck and just love people, but this is a complete God thing. But we genuinely, I can tell you this, I genuinely want people to experience God's best for their life, and that's my passion. And to help people study their own Bibles, not so they can be all sweet like I'm a cool Christian, but to really live out God's best.
So you can see on the page here that the worship encounters on Sundays are at 9 o'clock, 10 or 11 o'clock, and 5 o'clock. Also online. Believe right. You're doing your still services online.
Yeah, so everything's on. It's actually the only live encounters 9 and 11. 5 is
Okay.
online only, and then
Okay.
throughout the week they'll repost those online. And but yeah, 9 and 11, come see us. It'd be cool.
The new location opened in December of 2020. It's located at 20120 Blue Sage Parkway. The best way to put that is you're right next to Elkhorn South High School. That's the best way to put it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then for more information, go to lovechurch.org. That's lovechurch.org. If you want more information about MCL Construction, you can find us on social media: LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and of course, you can go to our website at mclconstruction.com. Todd, absolutely great conversation. I had a lot of fun with you. I appreciate you taking 30 minutes of your time. Best of luck to you. Best of luck to your ministry. And thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Back to you guys. We love you guys. Forever grateful. Appreciate it.
All right. We will be back in 1 month with another client conversation brought to you MCL Construction. Again, for Todd Doxzon, I'm Travis Justice. We'll see you next time.